Hello Magic players and collectors, welcome back to the Land Library. I'm your librarian, and in this episode of Latest Loadout, I'm going over Avatar The Last Airbender. This is a standard legal Universes Beyond set, which seems to be the norm for Universes Beyond after Final Fantasy was standard legal. This was released on November 21st of 2025, and is of course based on the show Avatar The Last Airbender. It also has a bonus sheet of cards illustrated with actual frames from the show, which is pretty neat, along with a jumpstart set and a pair of tutorial mini decks, all of which are lumped into a set called Avatar The Last Airbender Eternal. Eternal does not change format legality of any reprints, and new cards are not standard legal, are legal for all the formats like Legacy and Commander that basically just let everything in. This set also introduces some new mechanics based on the different element bending techniques, but more on those later. For now, let's just start on the returning land section. You already know that the first thing on this list is the basics. There is a set of regular basics and two sets of full arts featuring iconic places from the show. The first set is called the Appa Lands, which all have Appa flying past, and the second set is called the Avatar's Journey Lands, with various places the main cast went to. Next up is actually not Command Tower. There's no new Command Tower in this one, not even in the Secret Lair drops, but there are two lands in the Secret Lairs, Thespian Stage, a channel favorite, which taps for a colorless, or for 2 mana taps to copy any land in play, except it retains its ability to continue copying lands. And Path of Ancestry, which enters tapped, can tap for a mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Then, if that was spent on a creature of a matching creature type to your commander, which also includes your commander, you scry 1. Now, onto the lands from Eternal, because there's no returning lands outside of the basics in the main set. We've got the Thriving Isles. This is a cycle of lands printed mostly in Jumpstart sets, and of course are printed here in this Jumpstart set, that enter tapped and have you choose a color to then tap for either their primary color or the chosen color. These include Thriving Bluff, Thriving Grove, Thriving Heath, Thriving Isle, and Thriving Moor. Then we're at the bonus sheet lands, starting with Fabled Passage. This land simply taps and sacks to search for any basic, put it in play tapped, and then checks if you have 4 or more lands. If you do, it untaps the land it just fetched. And Sunbaked Canyon, which is the Boros Horizon land, tapping for either a white or red mana at the cost of a life, or you can pay 1 generic and tap and sack to draw a card. Then Tarnished Citadel, which can tap for a colorless, or tap for any color mana at the cost of 3 damage to yourself. It's pretty surprising to see this getting a reprint, considering it's only had 1 reprint ever since its initial print in 2001, and it was a very recent reprint too, being in Mystery Booster 2. Anyways, next up is Treetop Village, a land that enters tapped, can tap for a green mana, or for a generic and a green. It transforms into a 3/3 ape with trample until end of turn. And now all that's left are a couple of reskins. There is the Boy in the Iceberg, a reskin of Dark Depths that of course does everything Dark Depths does, just with a different name. So it enters with 10 ice counters, can remove an ice counter for 3 generic, and once it hits 0, it sacrifices to create a Merit Lodge token, which also gets a reskin to Aang Awoken Avatar. And funnily, despite not being in packs together, the Dark Depths Thespian Stage combo can be done with just Avatar cards. And last but not least, Volcano of Roku's Island, a reskin of Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, a classic Zendikar land that enters tapped, can tap for a red mana, and while you control at least 5 mountains, pings all opponents for 3 damage every time another mountain enters under your control. And now one last thing. Interestingly, the tutorial decks have a bunch of technically different basics, but they're not really different. They take the art from the main set, but have the eternal symbol, and each have their own collector number and tutorial number. So by definition, these are different prints, but like, barely. So I guess we'll rapid fire them. I don't have anything else to put in rapid fire though, so it's just planes, 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 plains, 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 mountain, 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 and mountain. What a fun rapid fire! Now there's a really nice lineup of new lands in this set, starting with a full cycle of dual colors. These duals come in tapped, tap for either color, and have the option of paying for generic, then tapping and sacking to draw a card. These include Airship Engine Room, Boiling Rock Prison, Foggy Bottom Swamp, Kyoshi Village, Meditation Pools, Misty Palms Oasis, North Pole Gates, Omashu City, Serpent's Path, and Sunblessed Peak. Then a cycle of monocolored lands, each enters tapped unless you control a basic, and taps for their respective color, and they even all have extended arts, which is nice. But then they all have their own unique ability as well. Abandoned Air Temple puts a 1/1 counter on all creatures you control at the cost of 3 generic, a white, and a tap. Agni Kala has you draw a card, then discard a card for 2 generic, a blue, and a tap. Bossing Say earthbends 2 for 2 generic and a green and a tap. Fire Nation Palace gives a creature firebending 4 until end of turn at the cost of a generic, a red, and that tap. And Realm of Ko creates a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token that can't block or be blocked except by other spirits at the cost of 3 generic, a black, and of course, that tap. Now, I think I should take a moment to talk about the bending abilities, or at least the 2 that are relevant to these lands. Firebending makes a creature create mana equal to its number. In the case of Fire Nation Palace, that's 4 red mana at the beginning of your combat phase. But it doesn't do anything about making that mana stick around, so you either have to use it or lose it. And since it's not main phase, that means just instants or abilities. And while you are allowed to, if you use Fire Nation Palace to give something firebending off of the firebending mana you just got from something else, like a second Fire Nation Palace, it won't actually do anything because you've already passed the trigger. Although, I suppose you could pair it with something like Full Throttle to get extra combat phases, and the future combat phases will still make more firebending mana, but we're getting a little complicated here. As for earthbending, it turns a land you control into a 0/0 typeless creature with haste and 1/1 counters equal to the earthbending number, which for Bossing Say is 2. Additionally, that land retains everything it had before, all abilities, keywords, and types, and if it goes to the graveyard or exile for any reason, it just comes back to the battlefield as its original self. I might also make a short video going more into detail about the interactions and combos of earthbending, but for this video, I'll just keep it moving. So, on to the lands that aren't in cycles. We've got Rumble Arena. This land is clearly meant to be earthbent because it has vigilance but no self-transforming abilities. And it scries 1 when enters, which can be done repeatedly if it's earthbent because it will just re-enter every time it dies. And its regular land abilities are tapping for colorless or filtering a generic into any color. Next up, White Lotus Hideout, which is also a filter land, but can also just tap for any color without paying a generic if it's spent on casting a shrine or lesson. Then Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop, which can tap for colorless, tap for any color but only if it's spent on casting or abilities of allies, or for 5 generic, it taps to create a 1/1 white ally token creature. This land has an extended art version too. And finally, the last land in the set, and one of my favorites, Secret Tunnel. This has the cave subtype, which is the first standard legal cave to be added since the subtype was introduced, and only the third overall cave to be added since then in general. And I really love seeing new additions to subtypes that already exist, or I also really love new subtypes, but that's a little off topic. Anyways, this is another land intended to be earthbent because it can't be blocked, but it still has regular abilities too. It can tap for a colorless, or for 4 generic, it taps to make 2 creatures you control with a shared creature type unblockable. And this one also comes with an extended art. Like usual, I'll start with the weakest thing first, which is the cycle of dual colors. These are meant to combo with earthbending, I think, because they can sacrifice themselves for draws and just come back if they were earthbent. but their cost for sacrificing is just too high. The high cost is way too slow for much value in Standard, and Commander just already has way better options for the exact same loot, like the Horizon lands, of which there's already one reprinted here in the bonus sheet. Or there's some other things like Scene of the Crime or Phyrexian Spheres that can also do the same thing but better. These aren't the worst options for dual colors though, especially given that the Horizon lands don't cover all the 10 color combos, there's only 6, so these do cover the rest that those are missing, but even then it's still not great, these are kinda just mid. But something better for earthbending, Rumble Arena. It has vigilance for attacking and blocking every turn, along with an enter the battlefield of Scry 1 every time it dies and comes back, because if you earthbend it, it will keep dying and coming back, probably. It's by no means game breaking, but it at least is much more suitable for its role than those dual colors. And then Secret Tunnel, which is just a straight buff to Rogue's Passage. Same cost, but 2 creatures become unblockable instead of 1, and the restriction of having a matching creature type is trivial in most situations. Along with it itself can't be blocked, it goes in basically every deck that wants a Rogue's Passage because it's just a straight buff. And it doesn't even have to replace Rogue's Passage, you can just play both. Secret Tunnel is already in over 10,000 decks on EDA track, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a commander staple for a long time. But easily the best land for specifically earthbending is Bossing Say. It has repeatable earthbending for just a mana cost, and well, that's basically it. Reliable, repeatable earthbending. This is a really good thing to have, even outside of an earthbending deck, and with the extremely easy condition to enter untapped and even tapping for green instead of like colorless, it can easily be splashed into basically all green decks, even already seeing a little bit of meta level play, but only a little bit. The other lands in the cycle aren't quite so good in Standard. Coming in untapped and tapping for colored mana isn't really all that special if the other benefits aren't there. Fire Nation Palace giving firebending is hard to actually make use of because the mana will just fizzle unless you just happen to have something that you can use it on, which is restricted to like instant speed. It definitely can be useful, but it's hard to get consistent value from it unless you build a deck around firebending, which is a lot more of a commander thing to do anyway. Then Abandoned Air Temple adding 1/1s to all of your creatures is great, but that cost is not. It's definitely worth it if you have a huge board of creatures, like a really token heavy deck, but there's just way more of that in Commander than in, like, Standard. Then Agni Kayla is kinda just okay. Draw 1, discard 1 is fine for thinning your deck a little, or maybe you're trying to stack your graveyard, but it's generally just not a good use of your mana in a standard game because you can just spend it on something like Stock Up, which you can have 4 of. But it's at least a little better in Commander where games last longer and you have bigger decks, and you don't have multiple copies of Stock Up, so filtering is a bit more valuable. But Realm of Co isn't even very good in Commander. It goes in spirit decks, but it's not really that efficient at making spirits, and the spirits being unable to block non-spirits negates a lot of the value of them being unblockable by non-spirits. Still, an inefficient option is better than no option at all, so it does still have a place as more of a backup option. And in a standard deck, no. This is way too mana expensive to even consider. 4 plus a tap for an effective 5 mana for a 1/1 that can't even block? There's way better things to be spending your mana on. Next up, White Lotus Hideout, which is simple but nice support for Lessons and Shrine decks. Not really sure if there's a lot of overlap between those, but it works just as well for either alone, so it doesn't really have to have overlap. Shrines are fairly popular despite the small number of them, because they're quite fun to play, but Lessons previously wasn't even really an archetype, with only one set with about 20 lessons in it, and no real interaction with the subtype. But this set more than tripled the number of lessons and added plenty of interaction, making it an actual archetype. And this is a very nice support land for that new archetype. especially with a commander like Cody or Iroh who use multiple colors. And also, on the shrine side, it goes with Go Shintai of Life's Origin as the best suited commander. And finally, Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop, which, very similarly to White Lotus Hideout, adds support for a much less niche archetype than like Lessons was, this time allies. Any color mana for casting and abilities of allies, and even creating allies, even if it is a little expensive to do so, is pretty good for an ally deck, which also just received a ton of support in the rest of this set, really opening up the options, and this helps with making sure all of your options have appropriately colored mana. For standard, this is maybe like a 2 out of 5. There's definitely some impact here. Ba Sing Se is already seeing a little bit of meta play, but this set's lands are mostly going to see standard play at lower levels. A lot of the abilities are quite good, just too steep of a cost or circumstantial to see much play in the very fast-paced competitive matches. For Commander, this is a solid 5 out of 5. Commander is really where these lands shine, providing support for classic deck types like allies and shrines to see a lot more play in Commander, but not so much in Standard, and introducing new decks like Earthbending and Lessons, and introducing at least one staple, Secret Tunnel. The theme is a 5 out of 5. Obviously, this is a 5 out of 5. I've always said Universes Beyond sets have the absolute strongest themes. Having a source IP to borrow from just makes it all flow together so well. The iconic places from the show, the thematic abilities, the recognizable characters on the arts, it's all just super on point. Although the art is more like a 6 out of 10. Honestly, the art is cool, but a little lacking in this one. The only thing with multiple arts are the basics, and the main set just has a handful of extended arts, which are extra prints but not extra art. There's no showcase prints at all, and the bonus sheet borderless cards are pretty cool, but are also just like screenshots instead of new art made for the cards. Although the secret layer ones are new art, so at least there's that. It's pretty decent art, but it could have just been better. Overall, that's an 18 out of 25. This is a pretty decent score for a really cool set, especially for fans of the show. I think we'll be seeing several of these lands, especially in Commander, for quite a while, but I just don't think they can hold up in like competitive standard, and I would have liked to see a little more cards with multiple prints than just extended arts and basics. If you've made it this far in the video, please drop a like for turn and subscribe for more Landfield content. If I missed anything, got anything wrong, or you just have questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next latest loadout when Lorwyn Eclipsed comes out.